Hey, welcome to MindMajix. In this video, I'm going to talk about important interview questions on Hibernate. So these interview questions will help three types of audiences. One is beginner level, second one is intermediate level, third one is advanced level. When it comes to beginner level, the first question is, what is Hibernate? Hibernate is one of the most popular Java framework that simplify the development of Java application to interact with the database. I mean to say the point is, Hibernate is one of the most popular Java framework. So by using this framework, we can able to communicate with the database. I mean to say, Hibernate is using to implement persistence logic. So as part of application development, as a developer, we need to implement a lot of logics, right? Like presentation logic, request data gathering logic, form validation logic, business logic, persistence logic, session management logic, middleware services, etc. So in these logics, we are using Hibernate to implement persistence logic. I mean to say, the logic which is useful to communicate with the database to store our data permanently. And one more point is, Hibernate is an object relational mapping tool. Hibernate also provides a reference implementation of Java API. The point is, Hibernate is a ORM tool. The full form is object relational mapping. We can able to map Java objects to database table, Java class fields to database table columns. And for implementing code operations in Hibernate, Hibernate provides some API. I mean to say the supported classes, the supported methods. By using those methods, we can simplify the code operations. And one more point is that it's referred as a framework which comes with an abstraction layer and also handles the implementations internally. The point is, the framework is nothing but it provides abstraction layer on client technologies. So Hibernate is a framework which provides abstraction layer on JDBC technology. So here, everything, I mean to say, here we can able to handle the implementations internally. So the implementation is nothing but it includes like writing a query for code operations or establishing a connection with the databases, etc. And one more point is Hibernate develops persistence logic which stores and processes the data for longer use. By using Hibernate, we can able to implement persistence logic. Persistence logic is nothing but the logic which communicates with the database and stores our data permanently, which stores and processes our data as we require for longer use. And one more point is Hibernate is a lightweight and most importantly open sourced, which gives it an edge over other frameworks. I mean to say the point is Hibernate is a lightweight technology, lightweight framework. Lightweight means to activate Hibernate container, we no need to take the support of any server. For example, if you are taking servlets and JSP, those are heavyweight containers because we need to take the support of server. Then only we can able to execute servlets or JSP related programs. But for Hibernate, we just need to create the object for the supported classes actually. So by just creating object for that class, we can able to activate Hibernate container. I mean, so for simple core applications also, we can able to use Hibernate. And one more point is Hibernate is open source. We can get it free of cost through internet, and we can able to get Hibernate software along with the source code also. And the next question is, what are the major advantages of Hibernate framework? The first advantage is It is open source and lightweight. As I already told you, Hibernate software is you can able to download it free of cost through internet. And one more thing is it's a lightweight component. We don't need to take the support of any server because it is not heavyweight component actually. In simple core applications also, by just creating object for the specific class, we can able to activate Hibernate container. And one more point is performance of Hibernate is very fast. Because the reason is when it comes to JDBC point of view, we need to write a lot of boilerplate code. But when it comes to Hibernate, we can reduce that boilerplate code. I need to say the point is for any specific simple requirement, we need to write around 7 to 8 steps in JDBC. But when it comes to Hibernate, we can reduce those number of steps. So we just need to focus on only the application specific logic. The common logics will be implemented automatically. So that's the reason when it comes to JDBC, the Hibernate performance, when we are writing persistence logic by using Hibernate, it gives us good performance. And one more advantage is helps in generating database independent queries. When we are implementing persistence logic, basically we need to write SQL queries. So when we are writing SQL queries, the syntax is very restricted actually. So as for the syntax, we need to implement the query. But when it comes to Hibernate, you no need to be worried or you no need to be bothered about the SQL because Hibernate provides its own query supported language, that is HQL, Hibernate Query Language. And by using that, you can able to implement the queries. So that's the reason Hibernate generates database independent queries. So the query so does not depend on database. So whatever the database, we are just going to write the queries with the supported of Java objects in Hibernate Query Language. And one more advantage is provides facilities to automatically create a table. So as part of JDBC, when we are working with any database, so we need to structure the schema. We need to create the table manually as per our requirement. But when it comes to Hibernate point of view, we no need to create the table manually. It will be created automatically. So when we just specify the required fields in a POJO clause or model component, then the table will be created automatically at database side with the support of some Hibernate properties. And one more advantage is it provides query statistics and database status. So in Hibernate point of view, we can able to know about the query statistics information, at the same time, the database status information also. And the next question is, what are the advantages of using Hibernate over JDBC? Here, the question is, we need to be compare Hibernate when compared to JDBC actually. Which one is the best one? Hibernate versus JDBC or JDBC versus Hibernate. Major advantages of using Hibernate over JDBC or the first one is Hibernate eliminates a lot of boilerplate code that comes with JDBC API. The code looks cleaner and readable. As I already told you, the point is when it comes to JDBC point of view, when we are trying to implement persistence logic for simple requirement or for any requirement, actually, we need to be focused on around 7 to 8 steps actually. So in those 7 to 8 steps, only 2 steps for application specific logic, the remaining or the common steps for every requirement. So even though we are working on any new requirement, we need to be follow these 7 or 8 steps mandatory. So that's the reason Hibernate eliminates that much of lot of boilerplate code. So Hibernate provides very clean and readable code actually. The code looks very clean and readable. And one more difference is Java framework supports inheritance, association, and collections. So these features are actually not present in JDBC. When we are working with Hibernate framework, as part of Hibernate framework, there are a lot of advantages. Like inheritance mapping, association mapping, or collections mapping. All these facilities are not there in JDBC. And one more difference is in JDBC, when we are writing queries, we need to write the queries with the support of SQL actually. In JDBC, you need to write native SQL queries. But when it comes to Hibernate point of view, as I already told you, Hibernate provides HQL Hibernate query language is more object oriented and closer to Java. As I already told you, by using HQL, we can able to implement the queries with the support of Java classes. Java object. We don't need to be depends on any database. Say by using HQL, we can able to implement database independent queries. But as part of SQL, actually, in case if it is Oracle, the syntax is different. Table creation or etc. Or in case if it is Oracle or MySQL, then the syntax is maybe different or data type may be different. But as part of HQL, actually, we can able to implement database independent persistence logic. And one more difference is in JDBC API for performing transaction management, like commit and rollback operations, we need to write it manually actually. In JDBC API, there is no automatic supported of transaction management support. But when it comes to Hibernate point of view, Hibernate implicitly provides transaction management. But whereas in JDBC, you need to write code for transaction management using commit and rollback. What is mean by transaction management? Transaction management depends on only simple rule, that is do everything or nothing principle. And one more difference is JDBC throws SQL exception, that is checked exception. So you have to write a lot of try-catch blocks to handle those exceptions. But when it comes to Hibernate drops JDBC exceptions and throws JDBC exception or Hibernate exception. So these exceptions are the unchecked exceptions. So you don't have to write code to handle it. And it supports a built-in transaction management, which helps in removing the uses of try-catch blocks. Hope you are getting the point actually. JDBC throws SQL exception. So this exception is checked exception. When the checked exception is raised in our program, so we need to handle those exceptions by using try-catch block. So when it comes to Hibernate point of view, all the exceptions are internally converted as unchecked exceptions. So those exceptions, you no need to write try-catch blocks actually. And one more facility is Hibernate internally supports built-in transaction management, which helps in removing the uses of try-catch blocks. And the next question is, what is an ORM? For this, the simple answer is ORM is a tool. The full form is object relational mapping. It is basically a technique that maps the object that is stored in the database. The Java object to or the Java class to database table name, the Java class fields to database table columns. We are just going to map. An ORM tool helps in simplifying data creation, data manipulation, and access. It internally uses the Java API to interact with the database. So as part of different code operations, actually, like either it may be data creation, manipulation, access, whatever it may be, Hibernate internally uses Java API to interact with the databases. As I already told you, there are multiple methods to perform code operations. And one more question is, why use Hibernate Framework? Why we need to use? The simple answer is actually Hibernate overcomes the shortcomings of other technologies like JDBC. Simple answer is actually, so we can able to implement the persistence logic by using JDBC, but JDBC is not sufficient for performing persistence logic with some middleware services technique. The point is, it overcomes the database dependency faced in the JDBC. In JDBC, we need to implement the queries by using SQL support. And based on the database you are using, you need to be aware of those databases actually. Those database related data types as part of queries. But when it comes to Hibernate point of view, we can simply use Hibernate query language, that is database independent query, not database dependence. So the point is it overcomes the database dependency that is faced in the JDBC. And one more point is actually, for example, if you are working with Oracle database in your project, and in future you want to migrate, or you want to change from Oracle database to MySQL database, if the persistence logic is implemented with the help of JDBC, then changing of database cost a lot. I mean to say changing the databases in the middle of the project development actually. So that is cost oriented when you are trying to implement persistence logic with JDBC. But when it comes to Hibernate, you can easily change the database, whatever you want, because it is not database dependent queries. So these are the database independent. I mean, we can able to implement the queries by using database independent query technology, I mean, query language, that is HQL, Hibernate Query Language. And one more point is code portability is not an option while working on JDBC. This is easily handled by Hibernate. Code portability is not an option while working on JDBC. Okay. Portability is nothing but when we are moving the code actually. But when it comes to Hibernate, we can able to reuse that one actually. We can able to handle this problem. And one more point is Hibernate strengthens the object level relationship. As I already told you, Hibernate is a ORM tool, object relational mapping tool. So this Hibernate strengthens the object level relationships actually. And one more point is it overcomes the exception handling part, which is mandatory while working on JDBC. So when we are working with JDBC, the exceptions which are thrown, all the exceptions are checked exceptions. We need to handle those exceptions by using try-catch mechanism. But when it comes to Hibernate, all the exceptions are unchecked exception. So we no need to be bothered about the exception handling because Hibernate internally support the transaction management. And in Hibernate, we no need to write try-catch blocks to handle the exception because all the exceptions are unchecked exceptions in Hibernate. And one more point is it reduces the length of the code with increased readability by overcoming the boilerplate problem. As we already told you, for JDBC, we need to write a lot of code. I mean, say for every requirement, we need to write the application specific steps. Along with that, application common steps actually. Okay. I mean to say for every requirement, we need to write around 7 to 8 steps actually. But when it comes to Hibernate, we can write the code in a very clean and readable way. I mean to say we can reduce the boilerplate code when we are implementing the persistence logic by using Hibernate. And one more question is, what are the different functionalities supported by Hibernate? Different functionalities. That is, as I already told you, the first point is Hibernate is an ORM tool, object relational mapping tool. By using this object relational mapping tool, we can able to map Java class to database table name, Java class fields to database table columns. And one more thing is Hibernate supports or Hibernate uses Hibernate query language, which makes its database independent. So by using, I mean, HQL is a database independent query language because it doesn't depend on any database. So by using HQL, we can able to implement the queries, and all these queries are based on the Java object only. And one more thing is it supports auto DDL operations. Auto DDL is nothing but, especially the full form is data definition language, the table creation, altering, I mean, say updates, or drop. So all these operations are automatically a drop, rename, okay, create, alter. All these operations, all these DDL operations will be performed automatically by just specifying some Hibernate properties in Hibernate configuration file. And one more point is this Java framework also has an auto primary key generation support. When it comes to JDBC point of view, when we are creating table, we need to specify the primary key. But when it comes to Hibernate point of view, there are a lot of generators which supports primary key generation automatically, like sequence, high-low, identity, increment. All these generators will help you to generate the primary key value automatically. And one more thing is the table also created automatically. And one more facility supports cache memory. So when we are getting every time the same data from the database, instead of that, basically we are trying to get it from the cache memory. then what happened? We can able to reduce the network round trips between Java application to database. And one more point is exception handling is not mandatory in the case of Hibernate. So because when we are working with JDBC, all the exceptions are checked exception. There you need to work with try-catch blocks to handle exception. But when it comes to Hibernate, all the exceptions are unchecked exceptions. So you don't need to bother about exception handling. It's not mandatory. And one more question is name some of the important interfaces of Hibernate Framework. Basically, when implementing Hibernate persistence logic, we are going to work with three interfaces mainly. One is session factory, and one more is session, and one more is transaction. Session factory, which comes from the package org.hibernate.session factory. So org.hibernate is the package name, and session factory is the interface name. And session interface org.hibernate.session, and transaction, which is from org.hibernate.transaction. So session factory, which implies the connection pooling in our application development, and session will be created by the support of session factory, which will help you to perform different code operations by the Hibernate supported API. And transaction, as I already told you, Hibernate support built-in transaction management. So it will focus on the concept or simple rule that is do everything or nothing principle. I mean, so the commit and rollback process will be happen with the help of transaction management. And one more question is, what do you mean by Hibernate configuration file? Hibernate configuration file mainly contains database specific configuration and are used to initialize session factory. Some important parts of the Hibernate configuration files are dialect information, so that Hibernate knows the database type and mapping file or class details. I mean to say the point is basically in Hibernate configuration file, we are going to configure the database details. I mean to say database driver name, URL, username, password. Along with that, actually, we are going to configure the Hibernate properties like Hibernate dialect as well as Hibernate DDL properties like HBM to DDL.auto, show SQL property. Along with that, we are going to configure the Hibernate mapping file information. So what is the benefit of Hibernate dialect actually? By using Hibernate dialect, we can know what exact version of database you are working actually. And you can able to configure multiple Hibernate mapping files information into Hibernate configuration file. And these configuration files actually are used to initialize session factory. And the next question is, what is Hibernate session factory? Session factory is the factory class that is used to get the session object. The session factory is a heavyweight object, so usually it is created during application startup and kept for later use. The session factory is a thread safe object, which is used by all the threads of an application. If you are using multiple databases, then you would have to create multiple session factory objects. I mean to say the point is actually session factory object is one per database point of view. When you are trying to work with two databases at a time, like Oracle and MySQL, so if you're trying to transfer the data from one database to another database, then you need to create two session factory objects for those two databases. Basically, the session factory is the interface, which is which is used to get the session object. And this session factory object represents the connection pooling information. And this session factory is a heavyweight object, so usually it is created during application startup and for later use. I mean to say the point is when we are working with Hibernate application development, first we need to create object for the configuration class. So based on the configuration, we are going to represent the connection pooling by the support of session factory object. So once the session factory object is created initially in the program development, so by using the session factory object only, we are going to create the session object. And one more point is the session factory is a thread safe object, which is used by all the threads of an application. And one more question is, what is session in Hibernate and how to get it? Hibernate session is an interface between Java application layer and Hibernate. It is used to get a physical connection with the database. I mean to say the point is basically what's our requirement? We need to communicate from our Java application to database. For implementing the persistence logic instead of JDBC, so as a developer, we are going to work with the Hibernate Framework because in Hibernate Framework, there are a lot of advantages out there. When we are trying to implement persistence logic with Hibernate, then we are working with session interface, session object. So this session object basically created by the support of session factory information, session factory object. So this Hibernate session is an interface. So that can be help you, that can be act between the Java application layer and Hibernate. So the main purpose of this Hibernate session object is to get a physical connection with the database. The session object created is lightweight and designed to be instantiated each time an interaction is needed with the database. I mean, so for every code operation, like for example, sometime if you want to work with store the database data information into the table, at that time we can able to work with session.save. I mean, session is mandatory. The session object is mandatory there. Or if you want to update a table information, then you need to work with session.update. There also the session object is mandatory. If you want to work with delete, scs.delete, I mean the session.delete, there also session object is mandatory. I mean to say the session provides methods to create, read, update, and delete operations for a constant object. To get the session, you can execute SQL queries, SQL native queries using the session object. So you can able to write either native SQL queries or SQL queries by taking the support of session object only. That's the point. So these are the important questions at the beginner level. So all these questions are related to the Hibernate basic environment actually. So why we need to use Hibernate? What is Hibernate? What is mean by ORM? And why we need to choose Hibernate? So what are the drawbacks of JDBC? Or we need to compare Hibernate versus JDBC, and what is mean by session factory, what is mean by session object. All these are the important questions at the beginner level. And after that, I'm moving into intermediate level. So at intermediate level, the question is mention some important annotations used for Hibernate mapping. Basically, we can able to implement Hibernate mapping in two ways actually. So one is by using XML file and other one is by using JPA annotations. I mean, it's a Hibernate supported JPA annotations. So some of the major annotations are, the first one is entity. So the package name is, all these are comes from one simple package that is Java x.persistence package. So Java x.persistence.entity. So this entity, @entity annotations will help you with model classes. I mean, this is used with model classes to specify they are entity beans. To specify which are the entity beans, basically we are going to work with one simple annotation. The annotation name is @entity annotation. When it comes to specify the table name, we are going to work with one simple annotation that is @table annotation. So the supported package is Java x.persistence.table. It is used with entity beans to define the corresponding table name in the database. I mean to say the point is, when we are implementing Hibernate persistence logic, then we need to be specify the table name with the support of @table annotation. There we need to work with one simple attribute that is @table of name equal to something. If you're not specifying @table annotation, then by default class name can be created as a table name automatically. And one more supported annotation is Java x.persistence.access. So this annotations is used to define the access type for a field or property. The default value is field, and if you want Hibernate to use the getter, setter methods, then you need to set it to a property. Like for accessing point of view, basically we are just going to generate some setters and getter method for every field. So this is used to define the access type, field or property. So the default value is field. And if you want Hibernate to use the getter setter methods, then you need to set it to a property. And one more annotation is javax.persistence.id. I mean, say @ID annotations. So this @ID annotations defines the primary key in the entity B. I mean to say, by using this @ID annotations, we can able to work with primary key implementation in our table. @ID specifies. So on a particular field, if we specify the @ID annotation, then that field can be act as a primary key. And sometimes we are working with one more annotation, @embedded ID. So it defines a composite primary key in the entity B. So embedded ID is nothing but same as the primary key, but it defines a composite primary key in the entity B. And one more annotation is @column, javax.persistence.column. So that helps in defining the column name in the database table. So to specify which the column name, the database table column name, basically we are going to work with @column annotation. So we need to specify this @column annotations on the fields of Java class fields. And one more annotation is javax.persistence.generated value. Basically, we are going to represent annotations with this simple syntax @ generated value annotation. It defines the strategy to be used for the generation of the primary key. It is also used in conjunction with javax.persistence.generation type enum. I mean to say the point is, as I already told you, in Hibernate point of view, by generating primary key, there may be, there are multiple strategies or there. We call it as generators, like increment generator, identity, sequence, high-low, all these are the generators. So these generators will help you to generate the primary key value automatically. So generated value annotations also will help you to generate the primary key value with a specific strategy. So this, by using the specific strategy, the primary key value will be generated automatically. And the next question is, what is transient instance state in Hibernate? What is transient instance state in Hibernate? The point is actually, when it comes to Hibernate POSO object or Hibernate entity object contains 3 states. One is transient, persistent, and detached state. So here the question is, what is transient instance state in Hibernate? If an instance is not associated with any persistence context, and also it has never been associated with any persistent context, then it is said to be a transient state. Transient state is nothing but the initial state. As I already told you, Hibernate point of view, basically we are going to perform the code operations by using the object, the Java object. For example, our requirement is we need to store employee information into database. Then we need to create object for employee class like employee equal to new employee. So when we are trying to store the information into table, then we are simply calling session.saveOrUppdate. Object E. So before calling session.saveOrUppdate or session.update, delete, whatever it may be, so before going to associate the object with the persistent context, whatever the initial state is there, that initial state is called transient state. If an instance is not associated with any persistent context, and also it has never been associated with any persistent context, then that state said to be a transient state. And one more question is, When an instance goes in detached state in Hibernate, when an instance was earlier associated with some persistent context, for example, persistent context is nothing but table, okay, mapping with a table, and is no longer associated, then it is called to be detached state. I mean to say, as part of storing employee information, first you need to create object for employee class. Simple example is employee equal to new employee. So here, whatever the object you created initially, that object is in transient state. So once you are trying to perform different code operations like session.save of e, session.update of e, session.delete of e, then there the e object is going to associated with the persistent context, and it's going to store the information into table or update the information into table or delete the information into table. So that state is called persistent state. But when it comes to once the work is finished, actually, when we are trying to call either session.close or something, once the work is finished, actually, then it is no longer used, then that state is called detached state. And one more question is, which are the design patterns that are used in Hibernate framework? So as part of Hibernate application development, there are a few design patterns used in Hibernate framework. So like the first one is domain model pattern. So as part of domain model pattern, an object model of the domain that incorporates both behavior as well as data, actually. The domain model pattern. Okay. As part of domain model pattern, so an object model of the domain that incorporates both the behavior and data. And one more design pattern is data mapper. So data mapper is nothing but simply a layer of the map that moves data between objects and a database while keeping it independent of each other, the map itself. Okay. I mean to say, as part of the data mapper, it is a one kind of simple layer of the map that moves data between objects and a database while keeping it independent of each other and the map itself. And one more pattern is design pattern is proxy pattern. So it is used for lazy loading. As I already told you, it supports cache memory. Okay, we are trying to get the information from the cache instead of directly hitting the database. And factory pattern, so used in session factory point of view. As I already told you, the session factory is a factory class. I mean, basically it's an interface, but it's supported just like the factory pattern, design pattern actually. One more question is, in how many ways objects can be fetched from database in Hibernate? Here the question is, how many ways we can able to fetch date objects or data, okay, objects from the database in Hibernate. Basically, Hibernate provides following 4 ways to fetch objects from database. Like you can write SQL queries, or you can use identifier, or by using criteria API also you can do it. Standard SQL syntax also you can able to fetch. Okay, either SQL, identifier, criteria API, or standard SQL. And one more question is, what are the differences between load and get method in Hibernate? Basically, in Hibernate, when we are trying to retrieve any employee information or student information from the employee table or student table, for getting specific employee information, we are using 2 methods. One is load method and one is get method. Both can be used for same purpose actually. We can able to fetch the specific data. But the problem is when we are working with the load method, so that results in an exception if the required record is not found in the database. I mean to say, the point is, for example, if the employee table contains the records from 100 to 110, but I am trying to get 111 record actually. But is there any 111 record? No. The records is from 100 to 110 or 1 to 10, but I am trying to get the 11th record. At that time, if any specific record is not there in the database, then load method will raise some exception actually. But when it comes to get method, It does not return any exception actually, but it simply returns null when records against the ID is not found in the database. So ideally, we should use load method only when we are sure about existence of records against an ID. Okay, I mean to say the point is actually, if you are sure about the record, actually, basically we are going to work with the load method. Otherwise, we are going to work with the get method. And one more question is, what are the three inheritance models are of Hibernate? As I already told you, Hibernate supports inheritance mapping or association mapping, collections mapping. All these facilities are there actually. But here the question is, what are the three inheritance models or of Hibernate? Hibernate has following the three inheritance model. One is table per class, table per subclass hierarchy, table per concrete class hierarchy. And the next question is, what is the difference between session.save method and session.saveOrUppdate methods in Hibernate? Session.save method and session.saveOrUppdate method both are using for same purpose, which is used to store the data information in the database table. But when we are working with session.save method, then it saves a record only if it is unique with respect to its primary key and will fail to insert if primary keys already exist in the table. I mean to say, when you are working with save method, if the record is already existed with some primary key, because based on the primary key only, I mean to say it stores the information actually. I mean to say, if you are trying to insert the same duplicate information, then by using the primary key, it does not allow actually. So when we are trying to insert the same record by using session.save, if the record is already existed with some primary key, then it will fail to insert the primary because the primary keys already exist in the table. But when it comes to save or update method, then it can insert a new record if primary key is unique and will update an existing record if primary key exists in the table already. The point is actually when we are working with save or update method, if the record is already existed, then that record will be updated automatically. If the record is not there, then it simply insert the record. And one more question is, define Hibernate Validator framework. This one is very important, especially when you are working with Hibernate to or Spring to Hibernate communication. Hibernate Validator framework. So validator is nothing but which help you to perform some kind of validation logic. So data validation is considered as an integral part of any application. Also, data validation is used in the presentation layer with the use of JavaScript and the server-side code before processing. It occurs before persistent in the order to make sure it follows the correct format. I mean to say the point is basically data validation part can be done in presentation layer with the support of JavaScript. Basically, we are as a developer, we are trying to perform two kinds of validation. I mean to say two types of validations logic. One is client-side validation and the second one is server-side validation. Because in case the client-side validations are disabled by just changing some settings in the browser, then the server-side validation will help you to format the data. So as part of server-side validation point of view, we are going to use Hibernate Validator framework, so which will help you to validate the data before it is going to store into the database. It checks whether the data is in correct format or not. So the point is validation is a cross-cutting task. We should try to keep it apart from the business logic. So this Hibernate Validator provides the reference implementation of bean validation specifications. I mean to say the point is actually Hibernate, I mean, so validation is a cross-cutting task. So we should try to keep this validation logic apart from the business logic. So this Hibernate Validator provides the reference implementation of bean validation specs. And one more question is, what is transaction management in Hibernate? How does it work? Transaction management is a property which is present in the Spring Framework. So now, what role does it play in Hibernate? Basically, transaction management is a property which is present in the Spring Framework, but what is the role of this one into the Hibernate? Because transaction management is a process of managing a set of commands or statements in Hibernate. Transaction management is done by transaction interface. It maintains abstraction from the transaction implementation, JT or JDBC. A transaction is associated with session and is instantiated by calling session.begin transaction. I mean to say the point is transaction management is a process of managing set of code operations. For example, see there in this single application, if you're trying to perform at a time, saving the records or retrieving operation, inserting operation, delete operation, update operation, when we are working with multiple commands, so as the principle of transaction management, we need to be, these code operations need to be performed every operation. Need to be execute all the operations, otherwise nothing. The simple principle of transaction management is do everything or nothing principle. So as part of this one, transaction management is done by basically as part of Hibernate, we can enable transaction by simply creating object for transaction interface. So by just simply writing transaction tx equal to session.begin transaction, we can enable transaction management in our applications. It maintains abstraction from the transaction implementation. So a transaction is associated with the session, and we can simply instantiate it by simply calling transaction tx equal to session.begin transaction. So once the specific operation is completed, as part of Hibernate transaction, we need to be commit or rollback it actually as our convenient way. Okay, that's the questions for intermediate level audience. And now I'm moving into advanced level audience. What is one-to-one association in Hibernate? In this type of mapping, you only need to model the system for the entity for which you want to navigate the relationship in your query or domain model. You need an entity attribute that represents the association, so annotate it with an @one-to-one association. So all these are the association, one-to-one association, one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many. All these association will help you to provide the communication between two tables, or when we are providing some association between the tables, like for example, see there, as part of one-to-one association, every customer will maintain only unique address actually, or every student number maintain unique roll number. This one is a simple example for one-to-one association. So in this type of mapping, we just need to model the system for the entity for which you want to navigate the relationship in your query or domain model. So you can able to navigate from student information to roll number. By using roll number, you can able to get the student information. Okay. So you need an entity attribute that represent the association. Basically, when we are trying to represent the association, so in XML file directly we can able to call the tag name one-to-one, or in case if we are working with annotations, at that time we can simply use the annotation name that is @one-to-one annotation. And the next question is, what is one-to-many association in Hibernate? The same thing here also, we are going to provide association between two components, say two entities. Like for example, one customer maybe contains 2 or 3 phone numbers actually. Assume that, for example, one phone number is for personal use, one for office, okay, one for the relative's phone actually, and some emergency contact actually. Okay, Assume that actually one person can contain many phone numbers. So this is the one simple example for one-to-many association. In this type of association, one object can be associated with multiple or different objects. So talking about the mapping, the one-to-many mapping is implemented using a set Java collection that does not have a redundant element. I mean to say, when you are trying to implement one-to-many association practically, then we need to be work with the one simple collection interface, that is set interface, because the set interface does not allow the redundant in time. It does not allow the duplicate element. Like as I already told you, every phone number, for example, home, office, or emergency contact point of view, all these phone numbers must be unique actually. I mean to say this one-to-many element of this set indicates the relation of one object to multiple objects actually. And what is many-to-many association in Hibernate? Many-to-many mapping requires an entity attribute and one simple annotation, that is at the rate many-to-many annotation. So many-to-many association is always in bidirectional actually. So it can either be unidirectional and bidirectional actually. But in unidirectional, the attributes model, the association, and you can use it to navigate in your domain model or JPQL query. The association tells Hibernate to map a many-to-many association. The bidirectional relationship mapping allows you to navigate the association in both the directions. Simply many-to-many association, the simple example is many students, many faculties, or many doctors, many patients. Okay. What happened actually? We are going to provide the association in between those many students and many faculties actually. Okay. Basically, as part of implementing many-to-many association, we are going to work with one simple annotation, that is at the rate many-to-many annotations actually. One more question is, discuss the collections in Hibernate. Why we need to use collections in Hibernate? So the collections are very important in every application development actually, but as part of Hibernate also, it provides the facility to persist the collections. A collection basically can be a list or set, map, collection, sorted set, sorted map. The simple supported package is java.util.list, java.util.set, or java.util.collection, etc. Or some of the real interfaces types to declare the persistent collection value fields. Hibernate injects persistent collection based on the type of interface. So the collection interface generally behave like the types of value behavior. I mean to say the point is actually as part of collection in Hibernate, basically we are going to retrieve the elements, multiple elements in a simple list format, or where you are trying to work with one-to-many association, basically we need to be work with the set, or sometimes we need to be work with map interfaces actually. Okay, these collections are playing main key role as part of persistent collection value fields actually. Like we can able to Hibernate injects persistent collection based on the type of interface actually. So the collection instance generally behave like the types of value behavior. Same as usual, I mean, say collection importance in Hibernate is using nothing but for different kinds of operation. Basically, here also we are going to take the support of collections in Hibernate actually. Okay, as I already told you, one-to-many association point for we are going to work with this set. Or if you are trying to retrieve the bulk of information, then we are trying to keep it into the list type of objects. And one more question is, what are the collection types in Hibernate? There are 5 collection types in Hibernate, used for one-to-many relationship mapping. As part of collection types in Hibernate, so that can be used especially when it comes to one-to-many relationship mapping point of view. We are going to work with the either bag interface or set interface or list interface, array interface, or map interface. And one more question is, explain about Hibernate proxy and how it helps in lazy loading. As I already told you, instead of, I mean, sometimes if we are trying to retrieve the data, instead of hitting the database, we are trying to get it from the cache memory actually. So the cache memory area is called proxy object actually. I mean to say, Hibernate uses a proxy object in order to support lazy loading. Lazy loading is nothing but on-demand loading actually. Okay, on-demand loading. When you try to loading data from tables, Hibernate does not load all the mapped objects. After you reference a child object through getter methods, if the linked entity is not present in the session cache, then the proxy code will be entered to the database and load the linked object. Especially at the time of association mapping, when you are trying to retrieve the elements from parent to child, or sometimes what happen actually when you are trying to load the parent table, the associated child objects will not be loaded automatically actually. So if you are trying to implement the application like that, that is called lazy loading. So after you reference a child object through getter methods, I mean, you need to be capture it with the supported getter method to retrieve all the child data. If the linked entity is not present in the session cache, then the proxy code will be entered in the database and load that linked object. It uses Java Assist to effectively and dynamically generate subclass implementation of your entity objects. So this proxy especially help you to assist actually. It uses Java Assist to efficiently and dynamically generate subclassed implementation actually. Subclassed implementation of your entity objects. And one more question is, what is the benefit of native SQL query supporting Hibernate? Hibernate provides an option to execute native SQL queries through the use of the SQL query object. For normal scenarios, it is, however, not the recommended approach because you might lose other benefits like association and Hibernate first level caching. I mean to say, Hibernate native SQL queries is one of the supported feature in Hibernate, but the point is actually Hibernate provides an option to execute native SQL queries through the use of the SQL query object. So to implement native SQL queries, we need to work with one simple interface, that one simple object. The object name is SQL query object. But the point is, for normal scenarios, it is, however, not the recommended. For normal scenarios, it is not the recommended one actually, because if you are using this SQL, native SQL support, then maybe you may be lost other benefits like association and Hibernate first level caching. Native SQL query comes handy when you want to execute database specific queries that are not supported by Hibernate API. Such queries hints or the connect keyword in Oracle database actually. I mean to say, especially what about the queries are not possible with the support of Hibernate API. At that time, you can able to work with the native SQL support. And one more question is, what is named SQL query? Hibernate provides another important feature called named query, using which you can define at a central location and use them anywhere in the code. I mean to say, the point is actually, whatever the query is reusable for your application, you need to keep that query at central location. I mean to say, you can able to keep it into the XML mapping file by the support of query. Okay, so and this query you can able to get it into your application wherever you require. You can reuse it actually. The point is, you can create named queries for both HQL as well as native SQL point of view also. But these named queries can be defined in Hibernate mapping file with the help of JPA annotations like @named query. In case if you are working with native SQL queries, then you need to be work with one simple annotation that is named native query. And one more question is, difference between the first and second level cache in Hibernate. The first level cache is maintained at session level. I mean, separate. Every time when you are working with Hibernate application development, basically to perform code operations, we are taking the support of session object. So the first level cache is maintained at session level actually, while the second level cache is maintained at session factory level and is shared by all the sessions. Session is nothing but related to first level caching. If you want to perform second level caching, so that can be on session factory. So this session factory level and is shared by all the sessions. And one more question is, what is lazy loading? Lazy loading is a technique where objects are loaded as needed. As I already told you, on-demand process. When we are trying to retrieve the parent object, along with the parent object, so we no need to be retrieve the child object. So those child objects need to be retrieved based on the demand actually. Based on demand, we need to be enable it. So instead of an entire page, for example, this technique become default since Hibernate version 3. I mean, so this lazy loading technique will be the default technique actually since the Hibernate version 3. So the main agenda of lazy loading is instead of getting the entire page based on the on-demanded, we can able to get it actually. So this technique become default since Hibernate version 3. Okay, these are the important interview questions at advanced level audience. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.